Mhm.
All right, there's 89 of us here.
90.
90 now, yes.
Numbers are going up.
Numbers are going up. Just want to give a few more seconds so folks can adjust the language if they need to. While we wait, if you can just drop in the chat where you are calling in from, joining us from today. We'd love to see all the different locations. North Carolina and Minnesota, all over the place. Texas, New York,
Hmm.
yes. Boston, where Kata's from.
Yeah.
Colorado. All right. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. So once again, welcome everyone to our first webinar in the Words Matter, the Impact of Anti-Immigrant Rhetoric and Policies on Clinicians and Patients series. This topic has been in the news a lot lately, and it's been affecting a lot of people. And we know how busy you are, and we truly appreciate taking the time to be here with us. I am Pamela Sakata Sales. I'm a program manager at Migrant Clinicians Network, and I'm here with my colleagues and co-presenters, Kata Weingarten and Jessica Calderon. A bit about MCN. MCN was founded about 40 years ago, and our mission is to create practical solutions at the intersection of vulnerability, migration, and health. And we envision a world where, based on health, justice, and equity, where migration is never an impediment to well-being. At the end of the webinar, we'll have an evaluation survey, and we'd really appreciate if you could take a moment to fill that out. We'll be sharing the links to that evaluation survey in the chat. And after completing the evaluation, you'll have the option to request a certificate of successful completion and or education credits. And just a quick disclaimer, we have no relevant financial relationships that relate to this presentation, nor do we have any relevant financial relationships with ineligible companies whose primary business is producing, marketing, selling, reselling, or distributing healthcare products used by or on patients. And at the end of this webinar, you will understand the impact of anti-immigrant rhetoric policies and enforcement on the physical and mental health of immigrant patients. You'll gain insight into immigrants' patients' challenges through first-person stories, and we'll also learn frameworks and practical strategies to enhance support for immigrant patients in your clinic. So once again, my name is Pamela Sakata Sales, and I use she, her, ella pronouns. When I was 4, my family and I immigrated from Peru to California. My parents did not speak or understand any English, and members of my extended family range from undocumented individuals to naturalized citizens. So I've witnessed firsthand the adversity that immigrants experience in this society. And that said, I want to acknowledge that I'm now a naturalized U.S. citizen. I'm bilingual and also a first-generation college graduate. And I recognize there is privilege embedded in these identities, and I continually reflect on how I can stand in deeper solidarity with immigrant communities. And I'll invite Jessica.
Hi, my name is Jessica Calderon. I use the pronoun she, her, ella, and I identified as a Mexican Latina immigrant. My parents, my sibling, and I, we moved to Austin, Texas. None of us spoke or understood English. I'm constantly thinking about how I can better understand and be along to support the immigrant community. Always staying mindful where I come from and honoring those people that have supported me along the way. Now I pass it to Kate.
I'm Kata Weingarten, and I am the granddaughter of 4 people who came to this country as teenagers. My parents learned English at school, and I'm incredibly grateful to my colleagues, both on this webinar and at MCN in general, who continually help me understand the experience of being an immigrant, an experience I do not share by virtue of my privileges as a white person born in this country whose primary language is English.
Thank you, Kata. Thank you, Jessica. So we recognize this topic can be difficult for some. 1 second. So before we begin, I want to guide us through 2 simple grounding exercises called box breathing and the butterfly hug. And I invite you to join me for one or for both. So box breathing is a simple relaxation technique that helps slow your breathing so it can reset and restore its natural rhythm. And this is something that you can practice anytime and anywhere. So I invite you now to sit comfortably in your chair. You can shake your arms and your hands to release any tension that you may be feeling. And so let's go ahead and try this together. So imagine breathing along the sides of the box that's pictured here on this screen. Start on the left top corner of the box. Inhale for 4 seconds as you picture going across the top of the box. Hold for 4 seconds as you visualize moving down the right side of the box. Exhale for 4 seconds as you move across the bottom of the box. And hold for 4 more seconds as you visualize going up the left side of the box. And at any time during this webinar, if you feel yourself getting tense, take a pause and utilize this box breathing method. The second grounding technique is called the butterfly hug. You can do it with crossing your thumbs and hands in front of you. You can place your hands on your shoulders. And once you find what is comfortable, you can start tapping with your hands or with your fingers. And what's important here is to focus on your breath. And so both of these are quick self-care strategies you can take anywhere, anytime, whenever you're feeling tense or, excuse me.
So the reason we're presenting these 2 relaxation techniques is that we are aware that not only in this webinar, but in your daily lives and in your clinical practice, you are witnesses to anti-immigrant rhetoric and the impact of that on you, family members, community members, and your patients and your colleagues. A witness is somebody who sees directly, hears directly, or learns about after the fact something that can be very disturbing. And we do know, and I know because I hear from my colleagues, that anti-immigrant rhetoric and the policies that follow from it can be very disturbing. Probably all of you who are on this webinar are here because you're on the left side of this figure. You are aware of what's going on, and it is having an impact on you. People use very different words to describe being in that yellow square. They can feel stressed, overwhelmed, exhausted, demoralized, disturbed, unhappy. And the point of this webinar, or one of the points of the webinar, is to give you frameworks and tools to help you move up into the aware but empowered green square, where you'll feel more effective and more competent in your daily lives. As opposed to moving to the right-hand column, where we take care of ourselves kind of in the short term by just numbing out, saying, I'm not going to pay attention to it. In the short term, yes, of course, on any particular hour or day, that may be an effective strategy, but long-term, it's not. Long-term, the only thing that is effective in relation to the events that are happening in our country today is to move up into that aware and empowered green square where we really do feel effective and competent in relation to what we can do something about personally, interpersonally, with our colleagues and at our institutions. So the overview of the webinar today is that we are going to be looking at and stating that as clinicians, you are most likely witnesses to the impact of anti-immigrant rhetoric and policies on your patients. We're going to give you an overview of that current rhetoric and policies and their impact. And we're going to be looking at what's it like for patients, what's it like for clinicians, what can clinicians do about it, and importantly, what can organizations do?
This is Jessica, and I'm going to be making my presentation in Spanish. So I'm going to give you some seconds to move to the interpretation channel that you prefer. I'm also going to do it. Listo, gracias. Les comparto que la retórica es un lenguaje diseñado para ser persuasivo o para causar una impresión en una audiencia. La retórica no necesariamente necesita ser verdad. ¿Qué es la retórica antiinmigrante? Es el uso de palabras, metáforas que crean un estigma y que retratan a los inmigrantes de manera negativa. Los presenta como amenazas o cargas para la sociedad. Este tipo de retórica a menudo proviene a menudo provee un miedo o un prejuicio hacia las personas que son extranjeras o diferentes. Estos son algunos de los ejemplos de la retórica antiinmigrante que hemos estado escuchando a menudo, como criminales, terroristas, invasores. En la pantalla tenemos algunos otros ejemplos. El objetivo de estas dos diapositivas anteriores es hacernos más conscientes de que estamos saturados con ese lenguaje que pone a una connotación negativa. Y ahora con esta conciencia tenemos la decisión personal de utilizar un lenguaje que provoque algo más positivo, algo más optimista. Por ejemplo, somos una nación de inmigrantes. Tiene una connotación más positiva. Somos, perdón, la Estatua de la Libertad, la Isla de Ellis, los soñadores, inmigrantes que no tienen documentación y que llegaron a los Estados Unidos cuando tenían 15 años o menos de 15 años. Esta palabra de soñadores, soñar, nos provoca eso, nos da la oportunidad a que sea algo más positivo. La retórica antiinmigrante se basa y está aumentando lo que es la xenofobia y el racismo. Esto conduce a políticas discriminatorias, incrementa el discurso de odio o los ataques motivados por el odio y sosaca la democracia. Hemos visto un ejemplo reciente del punto número 2 con lo que sucedió en Springfield, Ohio. La retórica negativa y falsa sobre los haitianos ha impactado no solo a los inmigrantes haitianos, sino que también a toda la población, a toda la comunidad en Springfield. Como parte de la campaña, las palabras importan. Produjimos varios testimonios anónimos en primera persona sobre el impacto de la retórica antiinmigrante de las personas que conocemos. Les vamos a compartir en el chat dos enlaces, uno en inglés y otro en español, para que tomen unos momentos, vayan a verlo y regresen con nosotros. Cuando regresen, si gustan escoger el idioma que sea de su preferencia, que nos dejen saber que están de regreso.
This is Pamela. Thank you, Jessica. So we just dropped down the chat a couple links to our Words Matter video series, one in English and one in Spanish. If you like, you can please take a quick listen to those videos. We'll give you about another 30 seconds and we'll come back and we'll have a Mentimeter. Sorry about that. Just 1 second here. Sorry. Can't find the. Sorry
We're,
about that, folks.
we're trying to
If
pull up the Mentimeter. That's what you're.
yes. We do have a link to the Mentimeter, so while I go ahead and bring that up, if we can just go ahead and click that, it will be dropped into the chat as well.
There we go. So we're producing a sound cloud through the words that you are introducing into the Mentimeter.
And can you see that going, Kata?
I can.
Okay, good. We have 43 responses so far.
That's almost half of our group. I think we'll give it another few seconds.
Okay.
And it's interesting because as people enter their words, the strongest words or the most frequently used words are changing. But I think you can see that the words are primarily words that are indicating that people find this upsetting, frustrating, heartbroken is become a word that's being used more, and certainly people are sad. There is the word empathy and understandable, and there was one other word that I saw coming.
Frustrated.
the frustrated and sad and angry are
Yeah.
seem to be the dominant ones, but there was one
Heartbroken.
informed and inspired, which I think is really also kind of an interesting thing to point out, which is that sometimes we, in addition to feeling frustrated, angry, and sad, heartbroken, and upset, we can be motivated by those feelings and move into action, or sort of feel that, this is just unacceptable and we are going to do something about it. So I can't see how many, 75 responses. That's just
Or
wonderful.
75. Mhm.
Thank you so much, everybody, for viewing the video. There are 2 others that we have on our website, one more that you'll have an opportunity to look at during this webinar. And we're very appreciative of your taking the time to put your responses to it. These, as Jessica, I think, did say, these were submitted anonymously, and it was really quite brave of the people who made the decision that they would create these videos for us. I think we can.
Yes, thank
move
you.
on.
All right. So we've heard about anti-immigrant rhetoric. Now let's take a look at anti-immigrant policies. And there are many kinds of anti-immigrant policies, and they often aim to limit the presence and rights of immigrants. And recently, these policies fall into 6 different categories: preventing entry, denying legal status, taking away legal status from those who had it, eliminating process protections, detaining, deporting, and terrorizing immigrant communities, and retaliating against anyone who speaks out against these policies. And I'll provide a few examples of these policies in the few slides. And anti-immigrant policies can exist and operate at multiple levels of governance, so at the local level, state, and federal, and each can influence communities in different ways. The zero tolerance policy required prosecuting all adults crossing the U.S. border without authorization, separating thousands of children from their families. It was intended to deter immigration, but caused deep trauma within immigrant communities and among border lawyers. The migrant protection protocols. Under this policy, asylum seekers were required to remain in Mexico while their cases were processed in U.S. immigration courts. And Title 42, originally implemented as a public health measure to curb the spread of COVID-19, Title 42 was used to rapidly expel migrants at the border. And so far, we've seen how anti-immigrant rhetoric uses harmful language to stigmatize and dehumanize immigrants, and how this rhetoric shapes public perception, which makes it easier to justify restrictive and harmful policies that target immigrant communities. So now let's take a closer look at how this rhetoric and these policies directly impact the health and well-being of clinicians and their immigrant patients. This is a graph from the Pew Research Center report that shows a shift in public opinion regarding undocumented immigrants here in the US. And over the past years, the percentage of voters who believe that undocumented immigrants should not be allowed to stay in the country legally rose from 22% to 41%. And the rhetoric and policies go beyond just legal and political implications. They have profound effects on the physical and mental health of immigrants. A fear, uncertainty, and discrimination generated by these policies can lead to increased levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. And this rhetoric and these types of policies are psychosocial stressors that can negatively impact health and lead to behavior changes that increase health risks.
So what Pam has just said, those 2 kind of overview slides, are based on research studies, as will be the next few slides as well. So there are 4 pathways that people have identified how state level immigration policies can influence Latino health. So one is that the stress that is generated is typically related to structural racism that has a multitude of impacts for physical and mental health. It affects access to important social institutions, particularly educational resources, healthcare, as we will see. It affects healthcare and related services very particularly. We've seen in Texas with the new regulation that in emergency rooms and inpatient facilities, people who come into those facilities will be asked their immigration status. Now, it's also the case that they do not have to provide information about their status, but many people won't know that, and they will make a decision not to access healthcare for fear of having to reveal their status and perhaps be reported. And it constrains our ability to access good jobs, food, healthy housing conditions, and of course, the kinds of jobs that people are able to access. So this is a graphic representation of essentially the same material or content in the previous slide. And what it's showing is that immigration-related policies and policies that are specifically related to immigrants work in a variety of ways. They produce stress, which has a direct impact on physical and mental health outcomes, but it also constricts and constrains access to important social institutions, health services among them, and these material conditions like what job I can do, where I'm going to live, what food I'm going to be able to eat because of what is available in my neighborhood. So numerous research studies have arrived at the similar conclusions, which is that the negative rhetoric, the negative policies that result from that dehumanizing rhetoric is a chronic stress condition, and it produces toxic levels of stress. And these toxic levels of stress don't dissolve in it the day after or the week after, or the month after. The consequences, the outcomes can last a lifetime for children and adults alike. And I think it's really important to emphasize that these kinds of policies and the ways that they disrupt access impact not just undocumented immigrants, but documented immigrants as well. So these are some of the mental health effects of anti-immigrant rhetoric on immigrants, and these are some of the terms that Pam has already introduced. There can be fear, anxiety, depression, even PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. But it's also important to emphasize or include that it can also enhance people's coping skills, and they can show up and actually feel resilient in relation to what it is that they have to cope with. One phrase that's used to describe the one aspect of resilience is it can motivate people to live each day moving forward, seguir adelante.
Thank you, Kata. This is Jessica. We want to share our second video from the campaign Words Matter. We're going to put it on, oh, it's already in the chat. If you want to go ahead and listen to it and come back.
And we'll just give a few seconds for those so people can watch that video.
Or a minute or two.
Mhm. Okay. So now that we understand the challenges, the next question is what can be done? So let's shift our focus to the solutions and actions we can take to address these issues. So we need to examine both individual and institutional biases, and self-reflection is a necessary step in recognizing our own biases and misconceptions about immigrants. And this is about being honest with ourselves and questioning how our thoughts, language, and actions might be influenced by stereotypes or misinformation. An institutional self-assessment is just as important, and we need to ask, is my institution I'm part of unintentionally or actively discriminating against immigrants? And are these policies in place potentially hostile or unfair to immigrants? And so asking ourselves these questions helps us take responsibility both personally and within our organizations and institutions for creating a more inclusive and supportive environment for immigrant patients. And we also could listen compassionately and safely. And while listening compassionately, it's important not to expose patients to their potential harm or discrimination due to their immigration status. Make sure to clearly communicate the institution's reporting requirements and ensure the patient understands these protocols before engaging in discussions about their fears and concerns. And the best strategy is to arm your staff or your patients with the knowledge they need to protect everyone's right to obtain health care. Clinicians play an important role in creating welcoming spaces where everyone feels safe, regardless of their citizen status. Simple, clear messages like no hate, no fear, immigrants are welcome here help set that tone. And also being aware of the barriers immigrants face when accessing healthcare is also important. And Kata spoke about this with the Texas Executive Order GA 46, which is similar to the Florida law that was passed last year. And as we already seen in Florida, many patients won't know the details of the law or won't trust that their information will stay separate from their medical records. And again, as a result, immigrants, both documented and undocumented, may avoid hospitals or clinics or emergency rooms even when they need the critical medical attention. So staying informed about basics of immigration policy at the state and local level is also important. Keeping an eye on community events like protests, community gatherings, or social media campaigns. It could be helpful to use your team meetings or your huddles to share updates on facts or rumors that have been circulating within your community. And healthcare facilities can also create flyers that guide patients to local services, such as advocacy groups that support immigrants. And of course, signing up to receive updates from Migrant Clinicians Network, where we share resources and information to help clinicians stay informed and effectively support migrant and immigrant patients.
So in the earlier in the webinar, I showed the figure that has these 4 different witness positions and talked about some of the feelings that come up when you are aware of what's going on, aware of anti-immigrant rhetoric and the policies, which of course is the case for everybody in this webinar now, or you wouldn't have signed up for it. But some of the other experiences and feelings that people can have are moral injury, moral outrage, and I'm going to talk about moral apathy in a moment. So when we are continuously exposed conditions that violate our values, our beliefs, our sense of what's right, what's wrong, what should or shouldn't be happening for ourselves, our colleagues, the people that we take care of, our community members, we can feel actually injured morally. And it can produce anger, outrage, but it can also produce a kind of a numbing out, a feeling of apathy that is just too much. And one of the reasons why we've done this webinar is to help if you have been experiencing or imagine that you're going to continue to have experiences of frustration, sadness, moral injury, and outrage, is to help kind of show you that there really are things that you can do. They're very concrete that can turn that experience of outrage into advocacy rather than apathy. So again, we want to we are hoping that this webinar will have moved you or given you some ideas about things you can do to move into that green square where you feel effective and competent, at least in your own personal and institutional sphere, and that you won't feel like you have to check out, numb out, or do something that's actually harmful. So in order to do that, we're going to say something that absolutely everybody knows, but unfortunately, very few people actually make it a practice to do. Self-care is absolutely critical if we're going to manage ourselves, especially in an environment that's increasingly challenging, toxic even, does produce feelings of moral injury. It's not a luxury. It's really important that we do it, and we have to really think about it, not so much as I'm taking care of myself, which is selfish, but I'm doing something to stay as resilient as possible for the people who need me, for my community. A misconception is that self-care takes an hour a day. It does not. 10 seconds of box breathing, 10 seconds of doing the butterfly hug, 10 seconds of looking out a window, taking a walk, and noticing the beautiful colored leaves. Anything that kind of regulates your nervous system, allows you to take a deep breath, is self-care. So we're actually literally going to take a minute now and ask you to think about one self-care activity that you can commit to doing every single day. And somebody started doing exactly what I was going to suggest, which is that put in the chat just one thing you can commit to doing every day. And as you read the chat, you may get some ideas. Somebody put in meditation. You can meditate for 2 minutes. Doesn't have to be for an hour. Doesn't have to be for 30 minutes. But we're really advocates for self-care as care for the community. There's
Snuggle
some
pets.
great ideas here. Snuggle pets, walking, yes. But remember, you can walk around the block. It doesn't have to be an hour walk. Laughter. That is one of the most efficient ways of calming, regulating the nervous system. We're getting some wonderful suggestions here.
Yes. Honoring my own boundaries. Excellent. voting, listening to music. These are great suggestions. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. Keep them coming.
Eating ice cream.
Yes.
That's lovely. So we've talked about things that we can do personally at the local level, at the state level, but here are some things that do need to happen at the level of our country. We really do need to enact policies that provide legislative and legal protections for immigrants and refugees. We have to improve the federal response to hate crimes. As Jessica mentioned, the situation that happened recently in Springfield, Ohio, to Haitians is absolutely unacceptable. And it's true that the city government and agencies in the community step forward to support members of the Haitian community, but there was an inadequate federal response. Cities and towns need to be more welcoming to immigrants, and there are many examples of communities that are doing a very good job of that. We have to continuously denounce anti-immigrant bigotry, racism, the dehumanization that follows from that, the xenophobia that leads to it and follows from that. We have to be really clear about doing that in a organized way at the level of the country as a whole. Everybody in our country needs to have tools to combat hatred and bigotry, and it has to be a priority at the federal, at the country level. One of the ways of doing that is expanding opportunities for dialogue in, again, at every single level of government and at our country. So Pam, do you want to
Yes.
help us through this one?
Yes. So thank you, everyone. So now that we've heard, the impacts of anti-immigrant rhetoric and policies, we want to ask and do a quick poll on whether you feel more confident in understanding the actions you can take to support patients affected by by this rhetoric and these policies. So let me go ahead and launch the poll here. One second. All right. Michelle, you should have seen a poll box window pop up in your screen. Go ahead and put it over here. Right, we are at 29 responses so far. Thank you, everyone. Keep them coming. We're halfway there, maybe a couple more seconds.
Well, I think we've done our job, team. We have quite a number of people who say that they do feel more confident. And about 20% of people say maybe. You're the realist, right? You're unclear until you've probably taken the actions that you've heard can be taken. But what we don't have is anybody who has replied no. And we also have people who felt frustrated. I hope you haven't felt frustrated with the way we have presented the material, but rather frustrated by knowing that these issues exist as they do. So I think we can end the poll. Thank you so much.
Okay, so that's the end of the presentation, today's webinar. I want to thank each of you for taking the time to join us. The issues surrounding anti-immigrant rhetoric, the policies, and the impact on healthcare are complex, but by staying informed and taking action, we can make a difference in the lives of immigrant patients. I encourage you to take what you've learned today and apply it into your practice and in your community. Start having conversations with your colleagues, challenge those harmful language and those policies, and create environments where all patients feel safe and supported. And I want to remind you all about the upcoming webinar in our series. Webinar 2 will take place on October 24th, and the final webinar in the series will be on November 14th.
We're happy to have you make comments in the chat, as some people are already doing. We do keep all of those comments and look at them.
And we value your feedback and would appreciate it if you could please take a few moments to fill out the evaluation form. The links to the English and the Spanish version will be dropped in the chat. And because we have a few minutes, we also have time for some comments if folks want to, a few comments if folks want to unmute yourself and share, or you can continue sharing in the chat.
I would like to say thank you to the interpreters. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you for
Absolutely.
interpreters.
Or of course, if you have any questions for any of us, we're happy to entertain any questions. But if you have experiences that you would like to share, this is a moment to do that. You're in community.
Okay. Yes, and actually that's on the next screen here. A few frequently asked questions. A PDF copy of this presentation will be sent to all of you all through a follow-up email with links to the evaluation if you didn't have a chance to complete it today. And you'll be able to access this webinar recording and all of our other archived recordings in the Migrant Clinicians Archived Webinars page on our website. And lastly, I invite you to stay connected with MCN for resources and trainings to help you stay updated and continue your learning. If you have any further questions or need assistance, feel free to reach out to us. So let's continue working together to ensure that all individuals, regardless of background and regardless of their status, have access to compassionate and equitable health care. All right, if there aren't any comments or questions, we'll go ahead and stay on for a couple minutes. But other than that, have a great day and thank you for joining us. And I hope to see you all next week. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our interpreters.
Thank you.
To Sonia, thank you. All the support.